Good evening, and welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds. Tonight I'm going to depart from my usual discussion about gunshot acoustics and delve into a little bit of personal stuff. Tonight's video I'm going to dedicate to Diana X, who has such a wonderful accent and who's always asking questions. I hear so many people say that I just wished I could understand what other folks are about, or I don't understand what their thinking is, or I don't understand what their motivation is. And so tonight I'm going to share with you my picture of the world, and as an inquisitive type person, I'm always trying to further my knowledge and come up with models or concepts or ways of gaining insight into the way that the world and people and various subject matters work. Somewhere along my lifetime, back when I was a young 30 or so, I was employed in Silicon Valley, and I had an hour or more commute each way to work. And being the type who just can't stand to listen constantly to the noisy radio or other things, I used that time to listen to tapes on audio. And during that time, I covered vast range of topics, from real estate to motivational speaking to personality types to chaos theory to one of my favorite was the Federalist Papers, which, for those who aren't familiar with them, are, in this case it was actors doing readings of the papers that our founding fathers wrote, to just have a discussion amongst themselves, actually kind of an argument as to the nature of and the formation and the principles behind the forming of our nation. But anyway, in this stint where I looked at personality types, I listened to three different people on the subject. You had the, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. We had the Myers-Briggs, which is, the Jungian-derived model, and then we had a couple other models. And they all were kind of complex in nature and required a lot of work to apply. So, for example, with the Myers-Briggs strategy, you had to actually have people take a test to first figure out what type of personality they were. Well, when you first meet someone, you just flip out that paper and ask them to take the test and say, we'll be fine if you just take this test. Well, that doesn't get you very far. So what you have to do is come up with ways of understanding people in their natural environment, in the way that you talk with them on a normal basis. And so I ran across a guy named Tony Alessandra, who published something, I think the title, this was back, a number of decades ago. I think it was called The Golden Rule. And he talked about, rather than treating people how you would like to be treated, treat them how they want to be treated. And to figure out what that is, you have to first figure out what type of personality they are. And it all starts with, of course, figuring out who you are. What type of personality are you? What are your traits? Now, we can get into the whole nature versus nurture, and certainly, the concepts put forth by psychologist? Yeah, B.F. Skinner, back in the 60s and 70s, I think it was, maybe even earlier. They became popular in the 60s and 70s, about conditioning. And for those of you who aren't familiar with B.F. Skinner, I think it's one of the things in psychology that's well worth reading, because it has it's a simple concept, and it has a powerful ability to predict and understand the influence of positive, negative reinforcement, and the timing of these reinforcements in terms of the effect on your behavior. And it goes way beyond classic Pavlovian conditioning, and I think it's well worth it. I ran across it first in my first class, in one of my first classes in college, because as a science major, you have to have a balance. So you're always looking for these classes you can take that are kind of easy, that are blow off, so that you can get on with your real interest, which are the sciences. and Psychology 101, in which the great deal of it was spent on B.F. Skinner's theories, was one of the first classes I took. But anyway, back to personality types. So Tony Alessandra had an interesting set of models, and it's been a long time since I read that, but let me see if I can do it some justice. What he basically had to say, and I found this very useful, because it's a model which allows you to quickly understand many things about people. And what he did was, and of course it uses graphs, which you know I'm fond of by now. He said basically we got 4 major personality groups, and the way we do them are based upon how people make decisions. And so we start at the bottom with people who make their decisions primarily based on facts, and we gradually go up here until you run across people who make their decisions based strictly on their feelings. And then he added in the other component, which was how quickly the people make decisions and how quickly they assimilate information in their preferred style of decision making or speed of decision making. And we start slow and go to fast. So slow on the left, fast on the right, in terms of how quickly we make these decisions and absorb information. From the bottom, we start with people who prefer facts, and up at the top, we end up with people who prefer feelings in terms of making their decisions. Guess if I could learn to spell F-E-E-L, I'd be dangerous. Okay, feelings. Alright. So, starting with the lower left-hand corner, we have people in this personality group who want to make decisions based upon facts, and they want to do it slow. And we're just going to give them a name, which he did, and we call them thinking types. Okay, and I'll get into the description of these. I guess we'll just go clockwise and stay on the same side. So up here, where we have people who like to make their decisions based on feelings and do it slowly, we have relator types. As in they relate to people. Over to the right here, where you have people who are basing their decision making on feelings and they like to do it quickly, we have a socializer. And if you want to, read his book, I think the most current version is something called the Platinum Rule. And then down here we have people who base their decisions on facts and do it quickly, which we call them the director. Alright, so let's briefly describe each person or personality group and why it's interesting. So one way of presenting this is to take a bunch of people of the same personality type, stick them in the room, and ask them to get something done. And the director types, if you stick a bunch of people into the same room who are of director types, and you come back in an hour and ask them how they're doing, they're at war. They're battling with each other, because these types of people are the ones who are the natural-born commanders. They can do it alone, they know best, they don't need your input, and they're always right. So for the group, you come back in an hour and it's war. They're all fighting. Haven't made a decision either, by the way. That's director types. Now up here, the socialists, and these are the guys who make their decisions quickly based upon facts or observations, if you would. They don't need your opinion, and they damn well can do it alone, and they do it in the blink of an eye. Up here you have also these people who operate on a more rapid basis, and but they're not making their decisions based upon facts, but they're making it on their emotions. So you stick a bunch of these socializers in a room, come back in an hour and ask them what you do, and you open the door and you found that they've ordered champagne and pizza because the only thing that really matters in life is partying. Okay, so in an hour they're all just partying. No decision make. Then I have no interest in making the decision. They're in partying. They're the party animals. They're the life of the party. Their whole life is partying. Now, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but it just gives you a good idea of that type of personality. Now you come over here to the slow side of the graph, and you stick a bunch of relators into a room and ask them to make a decision or get something accomplished. You come back in an hour, and you open the door and you find out that they're all standing around or sitting around talking and hugging one another, because after all, you can't hurt somebody's feelings by forcing your opinion on them. That's who relators are. So they're all hugging. I call them the huggers, the teddy bears. Okay? And then finally you get down here to my personality type in general, which are the people who base their decisions on facts, and they like their time to do it. And you come back in an hour after you've given them a task, you open the door, and they've all got their paper out, and they're all thinking about it on paper individually, because this type likes to analyze things until they're paralyzed. So they're still in analysis, and if you didn't prompt them, they'd come back 10 days later and they'd still be in analysis. Because we like to analyze things. All right. So now that we know if you stuck a bunch of them together what each group would do, let's get down to recognizing the traits that you see of each type so that you can recognize them. So let's start with the socializer. They're the easy ones. These are the people who are the life of the party. They wear their emotions on their sleeve. They like to be praised. They like the accolades. They have to be out in amongst people to be happy, and they prefer never to be alone. They're not so good on housekeeping. They don't care about housekeeping and their work, well, that's just a means to the end, where the end is getting out and going to party and being with others. You want a quick date or a quick fling, a socializer is your person, because they make their emotional decisions quick. But correspondingly, because they do make them quick, it could either be good or bad. Okay, their preferred colors were always bright red, bright yellows, these types of stuff. But you can recognize one of them by having a conversation, and when you're done with that conversation, you go, "Whoa, man, what a conversation! Now, what did we talk about?" Because socializers stick to one subject for about 3 seconds, and they move on to the next one. Okay, these are the types of people who have the greatest emotional swings, because once again, they make their decisions quickly based upon their feelings. It's all about feelings. It's not about facts. Facts and reality have little bearing in a socializer's world. It's all about being the center of attention. Okay, now talking about being center of, and of course, I guess you could say in bed they make some of the better lovers, if you like that style. Now we go down here to the directors, who are still the, and up here the socializer's favorite word, I, me. Yeah, that's right. So we get down here to the directors, and they're kind of the I people too. But instead of like the socializer saying I feel, socializers always like to couch things in terms of their feelings. So you always hear them saying I feel. They'll tend to be fairly well dressed up when they go out into public, because after all, what other people think of them does matter to their feelings. You can slight them easily, blah blah blah. Now we come down here to the directors, and that's a whole different beast. You walk into the office of a director, and in his desk is probably clear of most things, or at worst, he has these piles of papers of things that he's done. But mostly directors get it done. They get it done quickly. They're results oriented. They do it on facts. But don't look to influence them much, because after all, a director knows all, sees all, and makes all the decisions quick, and they're always right. But they are the natural born leaders. Whereas a socializer is, say, ready, fire, aim. A director will probably go ready, fire, ready, aim, fire, in that order. But you need all types. Let's just put it that way. So how is the love life of a director? It's fine. Him and his hand, or her and her toy, get along just fine. They don't need anybody else. Oh yeah, occasionally, but that interacting with people on an emotional level kind of gets in the way of getting things done. Results oriented. So then we come back up over to here, to the relator type, and these people are the ones who make the best teachers, because they're sensitive to other people's feelings, and because they make their decisions slowly or slower, they tend to stick with their decisions on an emotional level. So if you're looking for a long-term mate who is a stable person, these are the people. But you have to remember that these people derive their entire self-esteem, as well do the socializers, on what other people think of them. That's the nature of the people above this line, is that they derive their self-esteem based upon their feelings, which is easily modified by what other people think of them. Whereas the groups below the line are just the opposite. Both the director and the thinker derive their self-esteem from an internal world. They sure in the heck don't need input from other people. They're stable, and they're hard to move off. They have good egos, maybe huge egos. But their self-esteem is derived from within. The people above the line, of course, their self-esteem is derived from without, from the outside. Okay, back to the relators, though. Teachers, long-term marriage, stable long-term marriage. They tend to be relatively meticulous in their living style, both in their dress and their home. So they'll have, unlike the socializer, their homes will be fairly organized and neat. And life has to be in a regular pattern for them to be happy. And they look for compliments, yes, but they don't need it every 10 seconds like a socializer does. They don't tend to be the lives of the parties, but you'll find them amiable and just, these standard, easy to get along with people. And they do like people. They do like interacting. They don't need long stretches of alone time to feel good about things. But, on occasion they like to take things a little slow and and mull it over. But the worst thing you want to do with a relator is get them pissed at you, because it takes a little bit to get them pissed, and long term they'll stay pissed. Whereas the socializers, while they have these big ups and downs, they occur very quickly. One moment, you could be in a fight. The next moment, you'll be in bed making love. Whereas with the relator, hell hath no fury, like a woman scorned, would be a good, adequate description of the relator type. And that brings us down to and their favorite colors tend to be more muted. Their cars tend to be more stable. The cars for a socializer and director are going to be flashy. After all, their status is important. For a relator, it's a little bit more pragmatic. And then we come to the thinkers. These are the folks who like to take it slow. They, have great insight, but it takes them a while. Sometimes their world is a little cluttered, but it's all inside themselves. How would you recognize this type of person? You'll typically find their office cluttered with, reams of books and papers, or at best with these stacks of, 4 or 5 stacks of tall papers on their desk, things to get done. Thinkers, once they reach that 80% level where they understand things, the details, I don't care. Now, great artists are in this category. Great actors are up here, normally in the socializers. Okay, so that's the overall concept. And now we have to talk about how people interact. And before we do that, though, let's talk about the fact that the world is not divided equally in these groups. If you go and take a Myers-Briggs test and then you look at the breakdown of the population in terms of the 16 various personality type combinations, they don't divide equally. And I think basically if you go from top right to bottom left, you'll see that there's fewer and fewer people in these groups. So there's a lot of people in the groups that, kind of like cut out like this. By the time you get way down here, there's not too many people. So in terms of the, here's something. If you want to know who I am for, just go look up INTP. And that's, just go to any Myers-Briggs personality place and look up that personality trait, and you'll find out precisely who I am. And if in fact you really can get somebody to take a test and you know what personality type they are, you have a really good idea. So you walk up to a person and you start talking. How do you assess or estimate what their personality is? Because for you to have an impact on them, for you to understand them, you must first assess how they think, how they feel, how they react. Oh, and by the way, all these personality types can change dramatically under extreme pressure or emotion, or during emotional times. So a thinker over here who's normally very logical and cool and calm and collected, reserved and objective, can under extreme pressure become either a director or a socializer, having great fits of emotion and or just wanting either to take control or abandon things. The thinker, myself, I need time alone. Going to parties wears me out. Being around people wears me out. My ideas are in my head, and I need time with them to rejuvenate myself. The same is true a little bit about relators, but they also need the party time, or the time with others to rejuvenate themselves. Socializers, the only time they want to be alone is to sleep or make, recover from the previous night's indulgence, shall we say. Directors, they just do it alone, period, no matter what it is, and they're fine with that. All right. Let me think about this. Oh yeah. So back to the percentage of people thing. In dealing with the world and being one of the types that are kind of down here, the INTP Myers-Briggs personality type probably constitutes, less than 3% of all the people in the world. And me, coupled with a socializer, represents a big problem. My personality type, since I base my decisions on the facts and I like to do it slow and I have great understanding with that inward sense of modeling and looking at the world, when I come up to a party and I meet a real true socializer, I find them in the British lingo to be great steaming twits. They're ditzes, they're blondes. I mean, I know these are kind of general terms, a little bit derogatory, but that's to me how these people come off. And if we switch it around, a socializer will meet me and look at me and say, why the hell would I get near that person? They don't want anything to do. They're dull, they're boring, they're reserved, they're aloof, they're too deep, they're too focused, they're not well dressed, all these things. But in fact, the true is really just the opposite. My type, if you really engage me on a one-on-one level, have a great wealth of deep and satisfying relationships to share. But you have to overcome these initial differences. And the best way to do that, you can go out and, read and listen to all the books on how to win friends and influence people, dress for success, all these things that I've done and utilized. But the best way is to first listen and mimic what the other person is doing. And in that way, you'll come to understand what they might, their style of relating. So, probably the easiest people to identify are the socializer and the thinker, because the thinker is so reserved and the socializer is so outgoing. And anyway, if you come up to a person and you start talking with them and they're jabbering along about the speed that I am right now, it's pretty well darn assured that they're not over here on the left, unless there's some real reason to be excited or some real constraints. Now, YouTube, for example, I know that I've got a certain amount of time to get my message across. People aren't going to listen for too long before they turn the tape off, unless I maintain a level of interest. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about it. I'm going to, build a little bit of excitement. So if you walk up to a person and they're talking nonstop, mile a minute about everything under the sun but what matters, you got a socializer. If you walk up to and try to engage a director and looks at me and says, "Who the fuck are you, fella?" You've got a director. If you walk up to a person and they just want to they look at you, smile, and give you a hug, you've got a relator. If you walk up to a person and the first thing they do is pull out a pencil and write a note, you got a thinker. Or if they look at you sideways. Socializers and directors are quite often dressed to the nines. Relators are always meticulous, and thinkers don't give a rat's ass. For the most part. Oh yeah, sure, I'll try to spiff up a little bit if I'm trying to court someone or go out to the opera or something like that, but that's really not what I'd like to do. I just like my sloppy old t-shirt, my loose comfortable pants, and let's relate that way. Okay, so what I'm trying to get to here is an address is the common thing of I don't understand the other people. And because the vast majority of people are in this group up here, and if you happen to fall outside that group, their actions and their belief systems and the way they do things just doesn't make any sense at all. For me to understand most of the world, I have to stop and say, look, these people don't have to, for example, a socializer, they don't have to make sense. They aren't understanding reality. They don't care about facts. They don't care about consequences. It's all about the moment. They just want that high from engaging in conversation and talking and loving or whatever with other people. That's all that drives them. Truth, hey, that's fungible. We don't really care about truth. Because after all, if you and another person can have this quick emotional connection, who cares whether or not what the other person's saying is true? If it doesn't work out, you can break up the next minute. That's the world of the socializer. Now, the relators, on the other hand, are completely different things. When you engage with them, you have to, of course, be very straightforward with them, because if they ever discover that you're misrepresenting yourself, forget it. That's the end of it. Same with thinkers. We like to believe what people tell us, and if we find out that that's not true, or you've misrepresented, or you've exaggerated, there's some tolerance, but by and large, we start deducting merits from your credibility. Directors, they don't care what you're doing because it's irrelevant to them. You're irrelevant to them. They make their own decisions. They're in charge. You're really just irrelevant. I know that's kind of a harsh thing, but it's true for this personality type. But you need these people to get things done. So, back to how many people in the world are up here. The vast majority. Not just socializers, but people who tend to be faster on their decision-making process and it is dominated by people who have feelings, but there are significant people in the other category. Now, these are just approximations. These are ways of understanding. So let's talk about politics. Let's talk about causes. Let's talk about people who believe things that aren't true. That is the majority of the world. Most of the world does not operate on facts, reason, logic, and consequences. You go, whoa, wait a minute. You're just telling me that for the vast majority of the world, objective reality has no bearing. That's correct. If left to their druthers, the only thing that matters is their feelings, and down here with directors, results, in a way that, unless there's some feedback or some reinforcement, positive or negative, hey, it just runs amok on its own until it collapses. Whereas down here, both the relator who wants a stable environment and the thinker who believes they understand things, they both play by the rules. And if the rules are in place, they'll tend to follow them. The thinker will come up with ways to explain why the rules don't work, and the relator will come up with ways to tell you why the rules are bad. But they tend not to make up things that are unrelated to objective reality, if there is such a thing. Whereas over here, forget it. Matters not. Director's always in charge. What the hell does he care about reality? Socializer, come on, let's have another drink, okay? Who cares? Global climate change? Yeah, okay, fine. Hey, think this wine is good? That's just the way it is. So when you're frustrated and you can't understand why the other side doesn't see your perspective, stop for a moment and ask yourself, where do I fit in these personality types? And the best way to overcome that is to understand first who you are, and then understand your pluses and your minuses, your limitations, and your productiveness, and all these things, and then to understand the other people. You say, well, if the world consists mainly of these people up here who don't care about it, they just want to drink, party, and have fun, or start a war, which is what directors do, then how does the world exist? Well, that's why societies have to agree upon, in my opinion, a set of rules to operate by. And there has to be peer pressure or laws, and there has to be a common agreed upon thing. Because after all, if you abandon, this is my personal opinion, the rules of law, for example, then you end up here with just grab it and growl partying, and who has the bigger muscle or things, and things quickly deteriorate. Let's take and apply this to the Vegas situation. There's people on all sides of this thing. Now, we'll start with my personality type. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to look at things, which I have done, for example, in my area of interest for 2 years before I share a darn thing. Why? Because I like to do things in my own world. I don't really like to involve myself in public conversation much, because after all, those things tucker me out. I'm best energized by being alone in my own world, making observations. I'll come up with great insights and come up with great understanding. But when you push me up here into the party land or the director land, I get uncomfortable. And of course, relators, anybody above the line here, socializers and relators, simply don't understand me, because they make their decisions based upon how it feels. So, for example, let's take climate change. Change is a good one. Oh, we're killing the world with global warming. Guess which two groups that's going to appeal to? That's right, socializer and relators, because after all, facts matter not, reason matters not. And particularly for relators, they view this as a cardinal sin, because after all, you're hurting people, and that's the least thing that relators want to do. They never want to hurt people. Directors, he'll pull out his gun and shoot you. Global warming, oh, you idiot, boom, done. Socializers, once again back to, hey, you got a bottle of wine. And they'll, mostly their actions are dominated by whatever makes them fit in with the crowd. So you got fit in with the crowd, people who don't want to hurt each other, people who want to start wars, and people who want to sit around and tinker with things. And the vast majority are in that group up there, which leads to great consternation for the people down here, and vice versa. I mean, when you're at a party and the guy comes along and says, hey, it's midnight, keep your voices down, socializers go, oh yeah, turn the music up, break out the doobie, and let's have some more fun. So, I think I'll summarize this whole. Let me go review some of my notes before we get too far here. Make sure I covered some of the basic concepts. If I could get my mouse back, there we go. Yeah. I made some notes here. Let me see if I covered everything I want to cover. How they make their decisions, yes. Speed, yes. Different types. Yeah. Put them in groups. Yeah, the chart. Yeah. Okay, we've covered the basics, I think. So let's go back over to so summarize this up. I'm trying to think of a way to put it politely. There are groups of people out there, and these are the majority of the people out there, that can quickly and readily believe in something, whether it's objectively true with little information, and they can hold on to that belief in ways that the other people have no clue why they're doing it. And the reverse side of that is that same group of people doesn't understand why there must be observations, objective reality, order, and a logical approach to things. So there really is a big disconnect if we have, between these parties that make their investigation in Vegas fundamentally incompatible. Now the directors, they solved it in the first minute. That's probably not. Paddock shot somebody, or government did it, and it's got to be true because I say so, and they're gone. Not very few of these people. Well, there actually are a couple people, and you'll recognize them in the Vegas thing because they don't care what other folks think. They're in charge. They're right, and F you. That's the end of it. There'll be, relator peoples. There's a few more percentage of them as women, because women, for the most part, relate with voice, and men relate with images, and it's hard to be a one-on-one. It's hard to give empathy with images. It's very easy to give it with the voice and touch and closeness. So there's a few more women in this group, but these people up here in the Vegas investigation don't want to hurt anybody, and they don't want to be hurt. And if you slight them, there will be hell to pay. So these people, oftentimes in areas of conflict, and the Vegas research is just full of conflict, are going to be, long-term adversarials, but if you hadn't slighted them, they would be long-term dedicated people in your groups. The thinkers are going to be critical when you make mistakes at the detail level, or if you make mistakes with the big picture. I'm unforgiving in the sense that I think you're a twit if you can't see the reason and logic behind my arguments. And so I, when dealing with other people, have to make great allowances for their style of operating. And that brings us to another part. Who gives? Who gives and takes? Socializer, he doesn't give and take. It's all about the party. Director doesn't give and take. He's right. Social relator, well, they'll give and take as long as you can convince them that it's going to be good for the feelings. If you come to a relator and say, look, if we take these actions, it's going to hurt somebody, then they're not going to take the actions. If you come to my style and say, hey, look, we're going to hurt somebody if we take these actions. We're going to scratch our heads and hurt somebody. How are we going to hurt somebody? We're just telling you the facts. We're just telling you the reasoning. So, emotions are a little bit void in my personality style. Directors, once again, they don't care whether they hurt anybody or not. They're human beings still, and conditioning plays a lot in mitigating these personality types. But anyway, and then the socializers, once again, they don't care. They just go with the flow wherever the big groups are, where they can feel, in with the crowd, in with the groups, and the more people, the better off there are. So anyway, same is true in politics, same as in way of life. So I hope that gives you a little understanding of, one, how I see the world, which obviously is not the way that other people see the world. And I hope that for people who fall into outside of this red zone here, whether you're a director, a thinker, or a relator, to a large degree, you now have a better insight into what's happening and why people behave, think, believe, and act the way they do. Well, I know this is way out of the field of stuff that I've been talking about, but let me know in the comments if it proved useful. And until we see you in the next one, have a good evening.